So I believe America is the freest and most prosperous country in the world, but the CDC reports, and it's a little similar to the first guy's question, a little different, reports that suicide in America is on the rise. And I haven't completely fact-checked the statistic, so maybe you know better. But if that's the case, like, what do you think has gone wrong?
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, quick correction what I said earlier. If you remove car accident deaths, like accidental deaths where people are going to die, and suicide, then the United States life expectancy rate is the highest in the industrialized world. It's those two, not birth rate. Okay, so as far as why the suicide rate is going up. So I wrote an entire book on this. It's coming out in a couple of months. I think that America right now is experiencing a crisis of purpose. I think that we have an entire generation of people, a couple of generations of people who legitimately don't know what their goal in life is, what their purpose in life is. So my basic framework for how people enjoy life is that you need four things in life. You need individual purpose. You need to feel like when you get up in the morning, no matter what else is happening, you have a thing to do today that matters. Not just in the world, but that matters. If you were on a desert island, something that matters for you to do. Because when people lose purpose, they lose a reason for living. Right? You see this a lot with people who retire, people who are elderly. When they become depressed, they feel like they're not useful anymore. So you need an individual purpose. Second, you need individual capacity. You need to have the feeling that you can do anything, or at least you can do what you can set your mind to. Right? You have free will. You have the ability to make choices. You live in a country that allows you the capacity to make those choices. Right? And we, I think, have taught that, number one, there is no such thing as individual purpose. You really don't have a reason for living. You're basically a ball of meat wandering through space deterministically. You don't have the ability to make choices in your life. It's all been predetermined for you. Right? This is my big critique of Sam Harris, for example. And then I think the other two things you need a communal purpose and a communal capacity, meaning you need to feel like you're a member of a group, because we have a dual identity as human beings. We're individuals who, in isolation, do things, and then we're members of communities also. And we want to feel like members of communities. It's important for us to feel like members of communities. So we need to feel like we have a communal purpose, like all of us together are fighting for something that actually matters. And we need to feel communal capacity, meaning that the system of laws has to be such that it protects our individual rights and individual capacities and individual purposes, and also allows us to mobilize when we need to on a communal level in order to succeed and get things done. I think that over the last 50, 60 years, culturally in the United States, there's been basically a war on all four of these things. I think there's been a war on individual purpose, this feeling that you don't matter, you don't count, none of this matters, you're a victim. You don't have capacity, you're not responsible for any of your decisions. And this was supposed to be liberating, that you're not responsible for your decisions, but it's condemning you. If you feel you're not responsible for your decisions, you have no control over your life. It's a deeply depressing thought. Communal purpose, we don't feel like we're members of community anymore. It used to be that community was mostly felt in the context of church. I mean, that's just the reality. Most people went to church, most people went to synagogue, most people went to mosque, most people went to were members of a religious community. Now, we think that we're a member of a community when we're a member of a Facebook group, which is simply not true. Right? And the best evidence of this is obviously in Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, where he specifically talks about the idea that it used to be everybody was even a member of a bowling league. If you read Tocqueville talks specifically about how associations are the glue that binds a fragmented population in the United States. Voluntary associations where you feel you're a member of a community with a safety net where people are helping each other out. And then communal capacity, the idea that the United States particularly is special in the world and has a mission in the world to do X. And I think that's been removed too, because we've been told that America is a terrible, racist, awful place. So I think that as that happens, people feel purposeless, people feel like they live in a bad country, people feel like there's no reason for them to live, like nobody needs them, like they have no responsibility. That's really enervating. It's really enervating. And I think it's a mistake to blame that on economics or poverty, because the suicide rates that we've been seeing increase, I mean, it's the first active decline in the male life expectancy in the United States in something like 50 years. Right now, it doesn't make any sense, except as we have a crisis of conscience. And I think that crisis of conscience has not just led to an increase in suicide. I think that it's led also, much more obviously, to an increase in political partisanship and hatred. People are investing politics with a meaning that it didn't have before, an investment in the government as the only thing that matters anymore. This sort of tribalism that's broken out where we hate each other. It's not just that we disagree, we despise one another, and we think that we're bad. That gives us a feeling of meaning. That's why people are on Twitter yelling at each other. Not because they're doing anything productive, but because it makes them feel something. I think all of that's a problem. If we're going to rebuild a social fabric that supports individuals, we need all of the four factors that we mentioned earlier, and that will require us to re-examine some of the premises for Western civilization that brought us here in the first place.